Hello and welcome to Most Marvelous NYC, where we help you get your most marvelous NYC travel experience. I'm Megan, a licensed New York City tour guide and content creator and founder of The Megan Daily. And this is...
Hey, I'm JT. I am also a licensed New York City tour guide, and I'm the founder of knowitallnewyorker.com.
And we are here to help you navigate the ins and outs of NYC. Today, we are going to focus on the topic of New York City observation decks.
I love observation decks.
Both JT and I have worked at New York City observation decks. We have worked at One World Observatory together. Fun fact, they have licensed New York City tour guides there helping you navigate.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. I think that's one of the special features that One World Observatory has. And in fact, every single one of the observation decks in New York City today has kind of a special little feature. I don't want to call them gimmicks. They're all actually pretty awesome add-ons, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yes, you have to listen a little further to find out which New York City observation deck is best and which one you should visit on your trip here. But first, I thought
and which one is an absolute waste of money, piece of trash, garbage. I actually think that's going to be difficult. I'm just going to spoiler alert the end of the show. It's a little hard to say that one is the best. They all have little different things that make them better. But like, I have a weird favorite. I have one that particularly appeals to me. I think you're probably the same.
I can't wait to find out which one this is.
It's going to be very exciting.
I am an observation deck junkie, so I'm very excited to dive into this topic. Now, just before we dive in, I do want to mention that we are coming to you from the Welcome to Times Square studio, right in the heart of Times Square. We'll talk more about that later. But first,
the billboard.
But first, let's dive into our very first topic, which is the OG ODs. Now, I'm going to have Jonathan explain what an OG OD is and then dive into that topic a bit.
We are talking about the OG observation decks, the originals, the early ones. And it's kind of funny because we were talking about this and I was like, when was the first observation deck? Why do people like this? And it's back in time. Time machine. We go all the way back. I mean, listen, people go to the top of a hill to see what things look like. People love this sense of changing their perspective, of understanding the world in a slightly different way, seeing things from above in particular, because you get a sense of order that you don't necessarily see from being on the ground level with everybody else. So there's always that. We see that hills are useful in military campaigns, but if we're really thinking about New York City and we're thinking about some of the really early tall buildings, we're seeing church steeples. Trinity Church famously is the tallest thing in New York City for a very long period of time. But there is this forgotten observation deck that almost nobody knows about that was built in 1853. It was 300 feet tall, which was absolutely huge at that point in time, but burnt down 3 years later. It cost like $5 million in today's dollars, $5 million to create. And it was built for the Crystal Palace exhibition that was over at Bryant Park. And the really interesting thing, I think, is that when you're looking at that, like today, 42nd Street, there's an observation deck on 42nd Street today. And you think, wow, that's a fantastic view. You're right in the middle of all of these amazing skyscrapers. There's no skyscrapers back then. There's a lot of fields. It's really kind of empty. But when you look at the images, it's still pretty amazing. The Crystal Palace is down below.
So can you tell us real fast, first of all, what is the name of this observation deck?
It's the Ladding Observatory. Ladding was the guy who built it, or who it was built for. It was his idea. He wasn't the engineer or the designer, but it was his project. And it was basically profit making. And it was part of the Crystal Palace exhibition of industry and technology. And
And what is the Crystal Palace for someone who doesn't know?
yeah, so it's an imitation of an exhibit that took place in Victorian era London and then was imitated here in New York City. And one of the most spectacular things that happened there famously was that the modern elevator was demonstrated by Elisha Graves Otis. And it was a big phenomenon. And so you could see this giant glass structure where Bryant Park is now and where the New York Public Library is. There was a massive reservoir, big giant stone walls. So there was some cool stuff to see. And it was definitely drawing people to that location. But then it burnt down in 1856. And you kind of have to go a little while before there's something that people are really excited about being high up, and that would be the Brooklyn Bridge. By my accounts, I think you could say that the Brooklyn Bridge is an experience, at least, and you're way above, you're 154 feet above mean high tide, and people went onto that bridge for a view. People went into the Statue of Liberty, even though it wasn't designed for it. They went there for a view. And that's 1886. And then in the early 20th century, there are dozens of observation decks. And I got this printed out. There's a guidebook to New York City from 1939, and it lists all of them. The Bank of the Manhattan building on 40 Wall Street had an observation deck. The Chenin building across from the Chrysler building, 60 Wall, which was at 70 Pine Street around the corner, the Woolworth building. Even this building apparently had an observation deck that you could pay for.
So right now, as we mentioned, we're in the Welcome to Times Square studio, which is located in the Paramount building, which has an entrance on 43rd Street. And are we actually on 7th Avenue or Broadway here?
I think we're on 7th Avenue.
7th Avenue.
And a 7th Avenue entrance as well, where the theater used to be.
Yeah, and this is where Elvis Presley made his film debut, is my understanding. So this is a very
There's a lot of stuff that
historic
happened
building that we're in.
building.
And a lot of people, when they come to Times Square, they notice that the top of this building has a big glass ball on top of it. And they sometimes confuse that with the New Year's Eve ball. So if you
all the time.
So if you are in Times Square and you're looking around at the buildings and there's another building with a giant ball on top of it, that's the Paramount building. And apparently that had an observation deck in it at one point in time.
I didn't even know that. My friend Kevin Walsh wrote about that on his website. And then he also mentioned this other fantastic thing. And I knew this, that there was a building in Brooklyn, the Williamsburg Savings Bank Tower, in just outside of downtown Brooklyn, that had an observation deck. And he puts it this way. He says it was the highest structure at that point in time, the highest structure between Manhattan and Paris, which is sort of a funny thing it's like a great way of describing it. But there were observation decks all over the place. And then World War II comes and everybody is afraid of spies going up into the observation decks. And then I think there's this feeling that insurance companies say they're a big liability. And one of the other observations about these observation decks is that there's not a lot going on. You go up, you see the view. Once you've seen it, why go back? And there's going to be taller buildings and taller buildings and taller buildings. So like the Chenin building is like, I don't know, the Chrysler building's more exciting.
Well, for me, I find all of these observation decks almost meditative because you get to go up. And if you're in a city like New York City, it's very busy. It's very bustling. Sometimes you can get overwhelmed by the amount of people around you, by the amount of buildings around you, by the sounds around you, by the smells around you. And you go up to the top of these observation decks, and things can be very quiet, very serene. You're getting a bird's eye view of the city, and you feel like you're in the heart of the city, but you're above all of that commotion.
Yes.
And I just think that's so beautiful. And I can literally go up to the top of any of the existing observation decks time and time and time again. And the weather changes what it's like, the time of day, just the people around you. And one of the things that really surprised me When I was working as a tour guide at One World Observatory, one might think that you would get really used to that view, being up there
No, never.
for 6 to 8. I think the longest shift was 8 hours. So for 8 hours a day, as many as 5 days a week. And something that really surprised me was every time I went up, I discovered a new building, and sometimes that was just because it's almost like a Where's Waldo. You're looking at
Mhm.
all of these buildings and different ones pop out at you, but sometimes it's because we're literally building new buildings all the time. And I would turn around and say, "Where did that skyscraper come from?" And it came from the ground. And it just happened to reach a point where it was above the other buildings overnight. So we were literally discovering something new every single day.
And I loved how some days the light would change and it would somehow reflect, the clouds would open in a certain way and throw a shaft of light on a part of the city. And all of a sudden you could see it was like a spotlight was on that part, and you all of a sudden understood something new about it, or you saw things that you had just never seen, because so much of the texture of New York City can look identical. And then that little beam of light would suddenly illuminate a whole new idea of what you were looking at. I loved watching the traffic at night, like especially like on a weekend, and you would see all the traffic building up. And then for me, that was fun because I was like, I'm not in that traffic. It's a very different. The traffic becomes calming, and it's sort of like those long exposure where you see, or those stop motion, you see all of the cars moving and then stopping and then moving and then stopping. And it was like a meditation. It was like just this. I mean, I really did love it. I love going up to observation deck. So we're gonna, I think, taking on this historical perspective, we're gonna start with the oldest observation deck.
Yeah, so which observation deck is the best is the next topic. And I usually like to discuss the current 5 main
The
observation
big
decks
five.
in New York City in chronological order.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting the little talk that we had about the history of observation decks. I always tell people that the Empire State Building was the first, it was the OG. But as you pointed out, it was not the first, it was not the OG. There was an observation deck that existed at the Crystal Palace. Some people might refer to the Brooklyn Bridge as being an observation deck. If you listen to people's accounts of walking over the bridge when it
Mhm.
first opened, people talked about watching seagulls swooping under
Yes,
their
I love
feet for the
that.
very first time, and people equated it to walking on the moon. And then, of course, the Statue of Liberty opens up in 1886. People still, I mean, they reserve tickets up to 3 or 4 months in advance to go up to the crown and get this view from her crown.
Of the water.
So just take it with,
That it's I'm a
just
little critical of that view. All the
just
other views I love.
just take it with a grain of salt when I say that Empire State Building was the OG, but it's the oldest of the main observation decks that exist in New York City. And just to go over our main
Mhm.
5, we have Empire State Building, we have Top of the Rock, we have One World Observatory, we have Edge at Hudson Yards, and then we have Summit One Vanderbilt. And we're going to give about 5 minutes of time to each of these observation decks, and we're going to discuss them in that chronological order.
And you've been to all of them, right?
I have been to all of them many, many
Yeah, I
times.
have been to all of them at least twice now. At least twice. And I think just because I like saying things like this, if we think about the Empire State Building being the oldest one, there are some, like the Woolworth Building had an observation deck, doesn't now, is probably never, because those apartments up on the upper levels are selling for a lot of money, and those are now private balconies. The Williamsburg Savings Bank, same thing. So there are buildings that predate the Empire State Building, but I don't think there's any practical way that any of those buildings are ever going to get those observation decks back. So I think the Empire State Building kind of is going to hold that title unless something really bizarre happens.
Okay,
All right,
so
let's start.
let's start the stopwatch.
Oh, here we
So
go.
we we
5
we
minutes
we have a
on the clock.
stopwatch to attempt to keep ourselves honest. So Empire State Building, I usually say that it's really famous because it's our movie star. It's
Yes.
in a lot of movies and television shows: King Kong, An Affair to Remember, Sleepless in Seattle, Gossip Girl. elf. So it's really, really recognizable. And I find that when people want a connection to those movies, you want to go to the Empire State Building because that's where you're going to be able to walk in the same exact spots that your favorite characters walked. I also find that the Empire State Building really captures the spirit of New York City. It is not the tallest building in New York City. It's not the tallest observation deck, indoors or outdoors, in New York City currently. However, it has this spirit. Empire State Building was built during the height of the Great Depression. And during the height of the Great Depression, New York City managed to build what would become the tallest building in the world for the next 41 years.
Which is a record unto itself. I think that's worth pointing out. No other building has been the tallest building in the world for like anywhere close to that amount of time. And I love reminding people of that. And also, technically, the Empire State Building is the tallest building in the world with a riveted steel frame.
There you
If anybody
go.
ever asks.
One of the very first tours I ever gave was to a welder, and he just wanted to know about welding. So if you're really into riveted steel frames,
Yeah.
that's your
Welded,
building.
riveted. Yep. The other thing too that I think is, I totally think you're on point with that. It's a building that I think speaks to resilience, speaks to strength, speaks to longevity. And in a lot of ways, those are great kind of characteristics about New York. I remember going up to the Empire State Building with a friend of mine back in the 90s, and it was pretty low key. You went up the elevators, whoa, they're fast. You got out, you looked around, and then you went back down again. And that was for the longest time. That was kind of the model for most observation decks. And the thing that I think is so interesting about the Empire State Building nowadays is it's got that great 86th floor observation deck. But it also now has this absolutely fantastic museum that you're going to see on your way up, and you can move quickly through the museum, or you can really take your time. And there's some cool, really kind of modern, digital new media sort of effects. There's some great sound and some great video and visuals, and there's some really amazing artifacts and information about the building of the building, and some incredible facts about how quickly the building was built, how difficult it was. The elevator ride has a great little twist to it. And I was talking to one of their VIP guides, and she confirmed for me that she heard the same thing that I heard, which was a Native American language, which is really important because there were a significant number of Native American men who helped do the most complicated work, riveting all of the steel beams together. So there's lots of great detail and lots of great information if you're into that. You did a great piece on social media, which was like, which observation deck are you? And it was like, if you love history, then you are the Empire State Building. And I totally agree with that. It's got great history, and it now has some really great historical museum features that are part of the experience. Oh, and it's got King Kong's hand.
It does have King
I
Kong's
love
hand.
that.
It is an amazing Instagram
It
experience.
is. It's
There's
fantastic.
this one room on the way up where they basically have a model of King Kong and a video display where King Kong kind of like peers in the windows. And
He's
you
like
can,
reaching through. It's a 3D hand that you can pose inside.
it's
It's
really,
very,
really
very
fun.
cool.
Make sure you get a photo there. And just a pro tip, if you're visiting Empire State Building, I think it's totally worth it to just get the 86th floor tickets because that's where most of the movies and television shows were filmed. The 102nd floor observation deck is all enclosed. I like climate control, so
Mhm.
that's great. But they also offer tours, and these tours are so good. I believe they are quite pricey, but I believe
I
they are
think it's
worth.
worth it.
I
I did one. You did one too, right?
we're both tour guides. We can both be very critical
Very
of
critical.
tours and other tour guides, and our guides were
I
mind-blowingly
loved
fabulous.
it. I
And
loved it.
this is the real selling point for me. in addition to having all the artifacts of the museum uncovered and explained, you get to go to areas of the building that you
Mhm.
don't normally get to go. For example, on the tour that I think we both took, we went on different days, but we both got this experience where we go onto a lower level of the Empire State Building and we go into a bank vault because there
Yeah.
used to be a bank and they had this giant vault in the Empire State Building, and the only way to see it is by taking this tour.
I loved going in the basement. That for me was a key. I mean, it's so funny because you think, oh, the best part is going up to the 102nd floor. But for me, the most exciting thing was going into the basement. But I do have to say that for years and years, because I'd never done it, I had made fun of going up to the 102nd floor. I said, really, what are you going to get for all that extra money? You're just going to see New Jersey a little bit better, which I'm from New Jersey, sort of. So, like, I don't know why I was making fun of New Jersey, but the view up there is actually incredible. And I am much more in favor of that 102nd floor observation deck. It is totally enclosed, which is nice. I was actually there on a very kind of funky, rainy, windy day, and being up there and seeing the clouds scoot by underneath me in that climate control with the big windows floor to ceiling was super appealing, and I totally opened my eyes to that. It's one of the reasons why the Guides Association of New York City does what allowed both of us to do this. It's a familiarization tour. So, like, I didn't know before, and now I know, and I will never make fun of the 102nd floor deck ever again because I really loved it. It was a lot of fun. Okay,
And, I know we're
we are
going
over
over, but I do
time.
have one more important thing to say about the Empire State Building, and that is when you're buying your tickets, they do have skip the line tickets. This
Mhm.
is not always the case, but Empire State Building skip the line tickets are a game changer.
Yes.
You get to skip the lines for the elevator. It's like you have a red carpet rolled out in front of you.
I think there is literally like a red carpet for some of it.
I do too.
Yeah.
And not only do you skip the line on the way up, but you also skip the line on the way from the 86th floor to the 102nd floor and on the way down, which might not seem like that big of a
Oh, that's a
deal,
big deal.
but trust me, it is a big deal. So, in my opinion, if you're going to the Empire State Building, it is worth the splurge if you have the money to use those skip the line tickets. So, Empire State Building, got to move on to the next one, which is Top
Top
of
of
the
the Rock.
Rock. So, why don't you start off talking about Top of the Rock, JT?
So Top of the Rock is really, it's interesting to me because there was a period in time when there was no World Trade Center and that used to have an observation deck. Um, the Empire State Building had kind of, like we were saying, had kind of been like, we are the classic. World Trade Center came in the 90s. They redid their deck. I was actually up there for an entire day, me and a photographer photographing promotions for the new observation deck. And the Empire State Building still said, like, we got this. Like, we're the classic. Top of the Rock came along, game changer, and actually pushed the Empire State Building to a couple of interesting new improvements. So for me, Top of the Rock is the innovator. And then a lot of other decks. One World Observatory came along, Top of the Rock stayed still, and now they've made a big jump. One of the things we're going to talk about the jump, and you've already actually talked about this in a previous episode. But the thing that I love about Top of the Rock, and we didn't quite mention this for Empire State Building, when you're down on the 86th floor for the Empire State Building, there is a metal railing around you. So you are open to the air, but you are behind this metal railing, and they can be kind of strict about like leaning out past it. When you get to Top of the Rock, you first are looking out windows, then you can go out to some outdoor observation deck spaces with these glass panels and gaps between the panels where you can, especially if you have a smartphone, be taking images without anything in your way.
And there's a big important thing that you get in these images, which is
The Empire State Building, that is,
arguably the best view of the Empire State Building.
yep. And the other thing too that I love is when you go up, and you kind of have to know to do this, and sometimes you have to be a little patient. There's a narrow staircase that goes all the way up to the uppermost level, there's like 3 levels at Top of the Rock. You go to the uppermost level and there's no railings, there's no glass. You're just out and open, and you can spin around and almost get a 360-degree view. It's like 340 degrees. There's some weather equipment that's in the way, but otherwise open to the air. And I love the open to the air part. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, I think. But there's a new feature at Top of the Rock that I know you want to talk about.
This new feature, I love
Because
it.
you've done it.
I
I
have.
haven't. I've seen it.
I was one of the very first people to do it. So this new feature, it's called the Beam. And hear me out, it has a strange name. But essentially, there was this really famous photograph.
There was a beam.
Which you may have seen. It's called Lunch Atop a Skyscraper. A lot of people believe it was taken at Empire State Building. It was actually taken during the construction of Top of the Rock. So this photograph is a beam with a lot of construction workers sitting on it, taking their lunch.
Lunch pail kind of worker guys.
So what the beam is it is a metal beam that lets guests and visitors sit on it. They get
buckled in,
very
well
safely
secured,
buckled in, and the beam raises to be pretty much at the exact location where that photograph was taken. And then it has these very gentle movements that turn you around to get different points of view from the beam of the skyline. Again, there's not any glass panels. It's just you and the sky. You are far enough from the railing that you're not afraid that anything bad's going to
blow off
happen.
of the beam and
again, you are very well secured, and there's no sharp, scary movements. I'm a little scared of heights, and this is all very gentle. And then they take a souvenir photo of you where you can have your very own lunch atop a skyscraper iconic photograph.
And I was looking at the original. They did a side to side, and you look at the original and you look at the view, and it really is the same. It's like 95% the same, but that in and of itself is kind of awesome. It's really sort of mind-blowing.
I still think about how magical it was. I did that, I think it was the day after the Christmas tree lighting. So I believe that was in December. It might have been late November. And I still think about how much fun that was. And there's different ways that you can get access to the beam. You can buy it as a ticket add-on. I think it's $25 per ticket. I might be wrong about that. But again, Top of the Rock offers tours. And again, I know that it's pricey, but in my opinion, it is definitely worth it.
Because Top of the Rock is part of the Rockefeller Center complex from the 1930s.
And these tours take you throughout Rockefeller Center. And again, you get access to places that you don't normally have access to, including the top of the French building. I think it's La Maison Française.
Oui.
There's a garden up there, which is really beautiful. And I went, as I mentioned, during the holiday season. You get a view of the Saks Fifth Avenue holiday light show, which is just out of this world. You get to go to this
always reliably. Whatever year it is, Saks now, it's their tradition, along with the windows, to do this incredible light show.
Yeah. Oh, it's phenomenal. And then they also take you into this other little room where you get a beautiful view of the ice skating rink. And during the holidays, the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree. And you learn so much about the art at Rockefeller Center and the construction of Top of the Rock. So I 100% say do that VIP tour if you have the money. I know it is quite pricey.
I have not done that. I'm very jealous. It sounds like a great thing to do.
It will definitely be a highlight of your trip, both that and the Empire State Building tour. And I just also want to mention that a lot of tour guides.
No, you've got to choose one.
I also just noticed a lot of tour guides, when I ask them what their favorite observation deck is, they say Top of the Rock. And one of our colleagues, Matt Apter, said it felt like the city was hugging you from there, because it's the lowest of the observation decks. But because it's the lowest, you get to see way more detail of the buildings, and it really does feel.
And you're right in the heart of Midtown Manhattan.
Exactly.
Right in the heart. All right. That's been 5 minutes. I think it's time
to move on. So we deserve that applause.
Applause for stopping 30 seconds after our time. All right. That's fine.
The next observation that deck that we are going to talk about is One World Observatory, which holds a very dear place in my heart. And I am going to say that what many people will say is the weak point of One World Trade Center, to
Mm,
me, is the strength. And that is that One World Trade Center and their observation deck on top of it, One World Observatory, is entirely enclosed. So here's the deal. One World Observatory is the observation deck on top of One World Trade Center. I personally think there is so much gorgeous, dramatic, important history tied
right,
to
which is
One World
downtown.
Observatory.
I mean, there's two things. First of all, it's One World Trade Center, which has its own storyline, and it's downtown.
Correct. It's the only one that's
It's the only
downtown.
downtown.
And I think if you were trying to pair this with other attractions, for me,
Pairs with a nice Pinot Grigio.
the ultimate World Trade Center site experience is to take a tour of the grounds. A lot of people think they don't need a tour of the grounds. For me, a tour of the
Mm-hmm.
grounds is literally the most important. There are things that I had to learn. I think everyone's really surprised to learn the history of the World Trade Center site before the World Trade Center was built, during the World Trade Center original Twin Towers while they were standing, events of
I mean,
9/11, and how they are being rebuilt. So I think that you need to do a tour of the grounds and then go visit the museum. And I would say do the museum as a self-guided tour. They have
mm-hmm.
amazing free audio tours on
Yes.
the app. And then you go up to One World Trade Center on top of, or One World Observatory on top of One World Trade Center, and you see how New York City has risen like a phoenix
Yeah.
from the ashes,
It's kind of
stronger than it was
cathartic.
before. It
Yeah.
it's it's needed, I think, after a World Trade Center experience.
Yeah. And my thinking about it being downtown is that you're going to get the absolute best view of the Statue of Liberty. You're going to get an amazing view of the Brooklyn Bridge. And those are iconic New York City sites. And the other thing that I love is, I mean, I lived in Brooklyn for like 20 years. I could see where I lived. I like that part. You get, I think, a better sense of the lay of the land because you see how important the harbor is, how big the harbor is. You get a sense of where the ocean is. I always had sort of thought that Midtown was the best perspective because you're in and amongst all these skyscrapers. And then the more time I spent downtown, I really thought, no, this is it. You get a context. You're where the city began. You kind of understand why the city began there because of all the water. But the other thing that I want to say is just as a disclaimer, New York City's got some really nice weather, but not every day. And so the great thing about being in an enclosed space is, like, for example, this is really notable for me. At the Empire State Building and Top of the Rock, when you are on the western side, it is always windy. Always, always, always. It can be a beautiful, quiet, sunny day, and it is always windy. So if it's sunny and cold, it's really frigid over there. If it's a summer day, you're still maybe getting a little bit of a chill. But if it's raining, if it's any of those things, your experience at the open air decks are in the rain, in the cold, and at One World Observatory, you get none of that. Now, the downside that a lot of people complain about is that sometimes it's hard to get photos.
I want to say something about this though, because I literally am a content creator. This is what I do. I make videos. I am not necessarily an amazing photographer, but I do make videos and I do believe you can make good videos at One World. But really, unless you are a professional photographer, I think the photos are comparable to any other observation deck. And if you are a professional photographer, you know the equipment that you need to
Yes.
bring to get good photos without any reflections off of those windows. And if you go to the other observation decks, as you mentioned, there is a fence at Empire
Mhm.
State Building. There is plexiglass at Top of the Rock, and there are little holes where you can poke your camera through. But if you're trying to take a photo of yourself with the background, around, you're going to have plexiglass anyway.
Yes. And the other thing too is that a lot of those places, the reasons why people don't the reasons why people are anxious about taking photographs at a place like One World Observatory is because they want to be in the photograph. They want their friend or their partner or whoever to take the photograph of them. And there are some tricks to get the angle right so that you don't get the reflection. But also the nice thing about One World Observatory is that you actually have room to get a little bit more of a panoramic scene behind, because the observation deck depth is much greater.
It is.
And that's the other thing that I also like about that is I tell people who are afraid of heights, who like, I'm much more afraid of, this is like a weird fear. Let's talk. I'm afraid of falling off of buildings.
Oh my.
Right? Like, I'm not afraid of heights. I'm afraid of falling off things. I don't know why. I've got decent balance. But when you are at some of those buildings, you might have that sense of fear, like, oh, there's the ledge, and I feel so close to the ledge or the edge. At One World Observatory, you can sit with your back to the wall at a good distance from the glass and still feel like you're getting an amazing panoramic view. And I've talked to a lot of people who are afraid of heights, and not everybody thinks that's a fix, but there are a good number of people who say, oh, you know what? I took your advice. I sat back and I got a great view, and I didn't freak out, and I stayed up there with the rest of the family or with the rest of the group.
And because it is indoors, you can comfortably sit on those benches, and the photos aren't going to have you looking like the Bride of
With the
Frankenstein
hair.
with your hair very high up.
Yep.
So I am a huge fan of this. But the other reason why I love One World Observatory is, while the other observation decks that we've talked about have tours that you have to pay a premium for, One World
Oh,
Observatory does have tours that you can pay a premium for,
we're
and
going to
they're
go
fabulous.
over on this one. We're
But
going to go over.
they also have tour guides who, first of all, they're just walking around. They have iPads. They can answer your questions. You
They
could
are
say,
super smart. And I'm not just saying that because we used to do this, but they are super smart.
I was like the dumbest one.
Well,
They give us one of the things they do is they give us an hour to study at One
It's
World.
great.
Every single shift that we have, we are literally paid to study.
and the break room is like a little library.
So we are encouraged to always learn. We have someone who used to be the Manhattan Borough historian that works there, a
Still there.
former Guides Association of New York City president. She just finished her
Still
second
there.
term, still there. Every time I have a question about New York City, I know if I go to one of the guides there, they will be able to answer it. And in addition to walking around, they give shows.
Which is really fun.
There's this big circle of television screens called City Pulse, and I believe they still do it once every 30 minutes.
I believe that's correct. It's motion activated. It's a lot of fun. And for me, it was a great opportunity to help people understand some basic stuff about New York City that people asked all the time when I was walking around. And also just to talk about fun stuff that was going on that I wanted to highlight. If there was a particularly good concert coming up or a good show somewhere that I thought people should go check out, or I wanted to talk about my favorite pizza.
Well, they have a list. They have a list on City Pulse of awesome things that are happening that are curated every single day. So they're going to be up to date, and you can ask any of the tour guides. You could just say, hey, I have 24 hours left. Where should I eat? And you'll get an informed opinion. And that is something that just comes with the cost of your ticket. So I'm a big fan of One World Observatory.
And they still have the extra tour that you can purchase and have a guided experience from corner to corner to corner to corner. There's not a lot of like off limits access. That's the one thing that I'll say about that tour that some of the other observation decks have been able to develop, but who knows, maybe. I know we're both big fans of it, but it's time to go to the next observation deck and set the clock again.
Which is Edge. So we have Edge at Hudson Yards, which opened up just before the pandemic. It had really hard luck that way. But Edge at Hudson Yards, they are advertised as the highest outdoor observation deck in New York City. One World Observatory is the highest indoor. It's technically the highest total, but Edge is the highest outdoor. They have a sky deck, and the big famous feature of the sky deck is there is a little glass triangle that you can walk on top of, and it's glass. So you look down and you see the ground below
It's like
you.
100 floors up,
Yeah. So it's pretty
like 1,000 feet.
it's pretty wild to walk out. They do have like little safety dots on it. So in my opinion,
I don't know what the safety dots are for. So
well, they make it
I don't fly into it.
they make it just you know that it's a glass floor. You know that you're not really flying, which for me, I was like, "Oh, this doesn't make me feel like I'm flying." But I was just there last week, most recently, and people were like freaking out. They were like, "Oh my goodness, this is so scary. This is so exciting." So for a lot of people, this is incredibly thrilling. And this outdoor sky deck also has really clean, they're always cleaning it,
Mhm.
glass plexiglass, and it's tilted ever
Yes.
so slightly. So if you go to like put your nose on it, it feels like you're falling. It's I get freaked
I
out by
actually
that.
don't mind that so much. There's something about it. It's a little bit of a thrill to me because I feel comfortable with it. I
I'm
was not sure
impressed.
how I felt about it when I went up the first time. I was like,
I'm very impressed. I feel like I'm flying when I'm at Edge.
I do too. I I love that experience. I actually think the little glass triangle is overrated, and I'm a little annoyed that the guards don't let you jump on it. Isn't it strong enough? Right? Like, oh, we're not allowed to jump on it. Like, okay, so can we get like 4 people standing here? Like, I don't know. But I love um there's a set of stairs that you can sit on. They're sort of like the stairs, the glass stairs in Times Square. A set of stairs. And my favorite thing, my first visit, I had a glass of champagne.
They have a champagne bar, and I'm a big fan of champagne.
And I still have the little champagne glass on my desk. I loved it. I had such a great time. It's a souvenir glass, pretty sure. And I sat and I drank the champagne, and I was sitting at a level where I was above the glass walls. And I just felt like I was floating above the city. And it was magical. It was amazing. It, I just felt like I was levitating.
You really I agree with everything that you say, and they do have indoor areas. If there's inclement weather, they will close the sky deck, so you stay indoors, in which case I recommend that you go up to the top level where the champagne bar is. But that's where, in my opinion, you're going to get the best indoor view. They also sometimes have special features. They often have these really beautiful Instagrammable flower
Mhm,
walls,
mhm.
flower swings that if you are an Instagrammer, you've probably seen lots of content creators making content about. They had Sky Skate, which was the highest
Mhm.
glice skating rink in New York City. So keep your eye out because they always have cool things. And then they have a really action-packed adventure.
Oh, I forgot about that. I actually really wanna do this.
I have no desire to
I
do
am
this. I'm
kind of
too
psyched.
scared.
I told my family that I wanted to do it for my birthday, and they did not pick. I don't know, they didn't pick up on the hint. I have another birthday coming up, so who knows? You suit up in this suit that's got, like, straps and straps and straps, and you climb a set of stairs. Because if you see, this building in Hudson Yards, I always forget if it's 30 Hudson
30
Yards.
Hudson
Right, 30
Yards.
Hudson Yards. Let's see if I can it's got a triangular sort of roof line. You climb a set of stairs up the slanted end of the triangle, and then you lean off. You're strapped in, and you lean off the side of the building, and it just looks like really crazy fun.
I forget if it's called Climb or City Climb. It
Yeah,
looks absolutely
this is an add-on.
terrifying to me. It's so funny that you say you have a fear of falling off of buildings, and I'm the one that won't do any of these scary experiences.
Well, it's like you're strapped in, and you have so many straps. I mean, you're really like, it's a little, there's like signs that say, like, have you had a beer in the last 24 hours? Like, it's like they are, uh, they're very careful.
but people love it. And the photos that I've seen, the videos that I've seen look really great. So if you are someone who is a thrill seeker, like you want to literally live on the edge,
I see what
City
you did there.
Climb. City Climb is going to be the observation deck experience that you want. And you might also want to be walking on that glass triangle and trying to like lean on that plexiglass and drinking champagne.
I think the only thing comparable would be like a doors off helicopter flight over the city, but you have to go to New Jersey for that. And it does not last very long.
Yeah. And there's also a restaurant that I was told was very good by my tour guest that I had 2 days ago called Peak.
Oh, I actually was looking at the menu there on one of my visits and I was kind of tempted.
Apparently, the monkey bread is out of this world.
I like monkey bread.
They talked about the monkey bread on my tour
I
for
didn't
about
see that
10
on the menu.
minutes.
Maybe that was a brunch thing.
I think it just comes out. It's the complimentary bread is what it sounded like from my tour guests. But if they were wrong, that was my tour guests.
I'm down with
not
that.
me. All right. So are we ready to move on to the next one?
We are. Let's see. Did we haven't done a single one of these in our 5-minute window. So I know last time we had our 5-minute window, we were giving money away every time. So
well, I hope,
all right.
that
Charities.
I hope that the people listening are really enjoying the information and that it's helping them have their most marvelous New York City experience. And speaking of all of this, before we move on to our last observation deck, I do just want to talk about our sponsor, which is Welcome to Times Square. Welcome to Times Square is a billboard literally in the heart of Times Square. It is between 46th Street and 47th Street, right next to the giant red steps above the TKTS booth. And this billboard allows you to put a photo or a video of your choice on the billboard for 15 seconds, and it gets repeated every hour for 24 hours. And the cost of that is $150. And if you use the code Megan10, you get 10% off. And I just looked up Super Bowl ad prices because we are recording this the day after the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is $7 million for 30 seconds. So $7 million for 30 seconds. And I believe that Welcome to Times Square, you get an extra 15 seconds for just extra $50. So you can have 30 seconds on a Times Square billboard that repeats
thousands
24
and thousands
hours.
and thousands of people in Times Square.
For $200. So visit timesquarebillboard.com to figure out how you can get a photo on this billboard. And I think it's a most marvelous addition to any New York City trip.
It's a great surprise too. I mean, I think that's the thing is that it's that you see some of the videos that people do and I go, oh, look at that thing that you could do. It's like, oh, look, that's us. It's a lot of fun. And it's right there. I mean, so many people are right there in Times Square. Anyway, you don't have to go out of your way to take part in this.
Yeah, just visit timesquarebillboard.com and that magical moment in Times Square is yours.
Marvelous.
So we are now going to talk about our final observation deck, which is the new kid on the block. It is the most Instagrammable, taking social media by storm observation deck. This is Summit at One Vanderbilt.
I think that's really the way to think about it. I mean, it's a really interesting building, but it is really an experience. It is much more of an experience as far as I'm concerned than it is an observation deck.
I would agree with that. Now, in terms of observation, I do think that if you want a truly unique view of the Chrysler Building,
yes,
it
I
has
knew you were going to say
one
that.
of the most spectacular views of the Chrysler Building. I think it has a really interesting view of Empire State Building. But what you're really there for are these different rooms. So the first room you kind of get ushered into is like this hall of mirrors. I
Which is
feel like
incredible.
I'm traveling through the multiverse. I get to live my Doctor Strange dreams. There's like these sounds playing. It's very disorienting, but in a very cool way. They have mirrors literally on the ground, on the side, on the roof, and they give you these little shoe covers so you don't scuff up the floor. And
I had to
even
remember not to wear a mini skirt when I went.
yes, what I am wearing today is not what you would wanna wear to Summit, because they do advise you to wear pants or long skirt because there are mirrors on the ground and people can try to get some furtive glances, so just dress appropriately if you're going, and it's often very crowded, but somehow it doesn't ruin the photos. It's like all the people reflecting off of the
Mhm.
walls
I
in this
agree.
hall of mirrors just adds. It's great in the daytime, it's great in the nighttime. Then you get brought to this room of, like, silver balloon balls that, like, bounce
It's
around
like
and
very like Andy Warhol factory sort of studio, silver everything.
yeah. It
It's
makes
kind of fun.
great photos. I think I see kids in there having a blast.
There's like a Kusama, the artist Kusama has a little installation.
Is it Yayoi
Yeah.
Kusama?
Mhm. And it's just, I mean, it's fun. It's interesting. It's fun. It's dynamic. Um,
They have an add-on, which is a glass elevator. Now, in my opinion, I hope that Summit doesn't get mad at me. I personally did not think that the glass elevator added a huge amount to my experience. I think what I would have preferred to have spent my money on at Summit is cocktails and food,
yeah.
because
Mhm.
they have this really nice outdoor, like, cocktail food
Sort of like
area.
Nordic influenced. There's like tundra up there. There's like
So
a Arctic meadow.
oh, I didn't even get to
Yeah,
I
there's
was
like all
there on
these
a
little
familiarization
planters.
tour, so I didn't
Yeah.
get to really experience that, but I was like, "I want cocktails." Now everyone
Oh,
thinks I'm drunk.
I had a drink and it was really good.
So
It was a delicious drink and some good snacks.
that's what I would personally go to Summit, and I would spend my money on that as opposed to the elevator, but I'm curious what your thoughts are
I
if
did
you've
the
done it.
glass elevator and I liked it. I don't know that I would pay for that as an add-on. It was sort of a fast experience and it didn't really open up. It was more like, wow, I'm in a glass elevator climbing up the side of the building. And like for me, I had seen it from the ground. I knew that it was there and I just really wanted to see what it was like. And then I saw what it was like and I was like, hmm,
And it was hard for me to create content, honestly. I was there with the Guides Association of New
mhm,
York City, and I had, like, these shots set up in my mind for the glass elevator, and we just couldn't get it because they do fit a lot of people
they
into the
do.
glass
Mhm.
elevator, so the illusion that you're flying is sort of at least when I did it, was sort of replaced by, "I gotta see over someone's shoulder." So in my opinion, the glass elevator, I would save your money and spend it on cocktails and snacks.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. The other thing too, especially about something like Summit, is that you have to be patient. If you're there for the photographs, there are going to be other people there. I mean, I don't know if there's a way that you can get in without anybody else, but you have to be patient. You have to know that there will be a moment when everything is going to sort of like the people are going to move out of the way and then you're going to get your photograph, especially in the mirror room or the silver balloon room. But you can't go up there and say, I'm going to take this photo in 30 seconds and I'm in a rush. I especially think the mirror room, which is such a phenomena, is the kind of thing where you do sort of want to stay and soak it in. It's not like there's a lot of places where you can sit down, but still you want to give yourself some time for that.
I spent about 45 minutes in that room. I really liked it. I
Yeah.
was there at sunset, which is probably the
Oh,
busiest
well,
time.
yeah.
If you want to have the best shot of getting photos without other people, you wanna go as early that's true of all the observation decks. You really wanna do, like, the earliest that you can get in for that, and the morning light tends to be really, really nice. Sunset is gorgeous, but everybody wants to be there for sunset, but it's really cool and gorgeous to see the sunset from Summit, especially in that mirror room where everything's being reflected. So you have the
Yeah.
sunlight being reflected in those gorgeous colors. So,
And the view of the Chrysler Building, which I happen to think is one of the most beautiful buildings in New York City. It's off in the corner. I almost thought that was an insult, is I thought you've got the best view of this building and you really only see it in kind of a narrow hallway. And that kind of frustrated me. And it set me off. If you don't care about the Chrysler Building, it's like, who cares? But for me, I was like, how dare you disrespect the Chrysler?
I still thought the Chrysler Building view was amazing.
I thought it was amazing. I just wanted it to be
Okay, so
a little better respected.
We have now gone through all 5 of our main observation decks. Do you have a favorite?
I do. You know what I wanted to do really quickly? Can we spend 5 minutes and talk about observation deck alternatives?
Sure.
I think you've got a little.
Well,
don't we have a little?
We do have a little time, but
A little slide for that?
I want to know what your favorite observation deck is first.
I want to talk about alternatives.
Okay, let's talk about alternatives.
Mommy and Daddy are fighting.
Podcast is over.
That's it.
Okay,
It's a
so
podcast divorce.
I do think that these observation deck alternatives are very important, and I get asked questions all the time about observation deck alternatives. And one of the main reasons is observation decks can be very pricey, even if you get the lowest cost ticket, even if you're using it through something like City Pass.
Yep.
It's expensive, especially if you're traveling with more than one person. A lot of people are coming here with families, so they have at least 4 people. And when you are paying about $40 a ticket, that ends up being, what is it, $160? I'm not great at math.
And you have to budget
experience.
your time.
Correct.
Because most of these are not places where you're going to run in and run out anytime you want. If you're here, almost any time, if you're here, you're going to need to manage whether it's a timed entry or waiting on lines. So it's not a quick kind of in and out sort of experience. So there are some other alternatives to get a sense of New York City from a different perspective.
So why don't you tell us some of your favorite observation deck alternatives?
So for me, it's about seeing the skyline and seeing it from something of a distance, not being stuck in the grid. And so my 2 favorite alternatives are the Brooklyn Heights Promenade, which you can get to very easily. You can, especially, well, I love walking across the Brooklyn Bridge. So we're going to go right back to that. That's the original observation deck alternative. Walk across the Brooklyn Bridge and walk up onto that ridge and look at the city, and you can sit there and soak it in for as long as you want for 100% free. And it's the same with the bridge. Walking across the bridge is free. Didn't used to be. Way back in the day, 1883, you had to pay to walk across the bridge to get that experience. My other favorite experience is a free experience, and it's getting out onto the Staten Island ferry. For free, folks, it is always free. Do not believe the people waiting at the door trying to sell you a ticket for $40. Staten Island ferry is free. You're going to go out to Staten Island, get off the ferry, go back on the next returning boat, and you're just going to have a magnificent view of the city. So those are my 2 top choices. I know I said earlier you could do a helicopter ride. Those are very expensive and very time limited. You wait a long time to get into the helicopter. Have you done a helicopter?
I have done a helicopter in South Africa.
Okay. I've done the one in New York. There's a big, it's almost like boarding a plane. You got to go through the whole kind of rigmarole. And then you get buckled in, you're up, you're over the city. We even did a longer version of it, and it goes very fast and it's very expensive. So I wouldn't even consider that. That's not on my list of alternatives. Do you have another alternative?
I have, I guess, 2 sort of alternatives. The first one is we have some elevated parks right by a little
Oh,
island.
yeah.
A little island, I think, even counts. Little Island and the High Line. But there's also a pier. I always forget the number. I don't know if it's Pier 57. There's
Oh,
a food
mhm.
hall inside, which is really good. They have some great New York City foods, including sahadis, which is like Middle Eastern
Oh, I
food.
love Sahadis.
Yeah, so they now have a Sahadi's
I
there.
didn't know
They have
that.
a Nomois tea parlor where you can get some dim
Oh,
sum there, so they have real
classics.
good options. So you can go there, get some good food, use the bathroom, and then they have a rooftop park. It is the largest rooftop park that's open to the public in New York City, at least in Manhattan, I think in New
I
York
have
City.
heard about that. I've never done it.
It's wonderful. I go there a lot, in part because I figure skate at Chelsea Piers, so I spend a
Mm.
lot of time at Chelsea Piers. But it's really great.
That was
You
my
get to go up
impression
there.
of what your figure skating looks like. That is not what it looks like.
Some days it does. You get to go up there and get just fabulous views. There's grass, so you could lie down while getting a great view. So again, another great free option. And then another option that I know people love to put out, I see so much content saying like, don't go to an observation deck, go to a rooftop bar.
Yeah.
Now, rooftop bars, in my opinion, they're not going to be right for everyone. Like if you are traveling with kids, you're obviously not going to go to a rooftop bar with them to drink cocktails. So you really have to, figure out who you're traveling with and what your priorities are. But rooftop bars can be really fun, even in the wintertime. Some of them have heated igloos, some
Mhm.
of them
With,
have
like, the heat
heated glass
lamps.
canopy, heat
Mhm.
lamps. You get lots of options. Sometimes they have a cover charge, sometimes they don't. It depends on the time of day, which one you're going to. But a lot of people like the fact that you do get this wonderful view, and what you're paying for is food and drink as opposed to the view.
Right.
I've yet to go to a rooftop bar where I was like, this view is as good as any of the observation decks. But in case you haven't noticed, I really like cocktails. So I've really enjoyed going to rooftop bars. So that is another option for you, especially if you're making it like a social event and you do want to pay for more of the food and drink instead of the view.
Yeah, observation decks tend to not be quite so social, and I think that if you are saying, well, like, I've only got 48 hours or, 3 days in New York City, and I wanna go out and have some drinks, and I wanna see the skyline, that's a great combination. Just do the 2 in 1. You don't need to wait on the elevators. You're gonna go up and do, like, drinks at magic hour or
Yeah.
something like that.
And I've yet to go to a rooftop bar that I did not thoroughly enjoy. So they definitely have my seal of approval, but you just have to know that you're going to a bar and you're still going to pay money, but you're going to get food and drink for that money.
All right. Do we have a drum roll? Is there like a little fanfare? Because we're gonna do now we're gonna do our favorites.
Oh my goodness.
We have a
Okay.
little title card for that, don't we?
Oh,
I'm excited about our title cards.
let me
Don't we?
let me see.
Which
Our
which is
personal
there we
opinion.
go.
Our personal opinions, observations, and experiences. Okay, which
Do you
one
want to
is
go
your
first?
favorite?
So you know what I was thinking about this? I kind of have I sort of have 2. I have 2. Do I have 3? I don't know. If I were going to go and say, you're going to do one VIP tour, I would say that it would be Empire State Building. I had such a great time on their VIP tour, and I really enjoyed that. It is the classic skyscraper. My personal favorite, like a place where I would go again just for myself and where my youngest son wanted to go for his birthday, is the Edge. I just love sitting there with that feeling of floating, and I just love it. It's like almost irrational how much I enjoy that. But I really also love the experience of going to One World Observatory and talking with our friends, talking with the guides there. I think if you want an experience that's very New York City immersive, in my perspective, you want to go, you want to like learn a little bit, not necessarily spend the extra money for the VIP. One World Observatory would be my choice. Those are my top 3.
I don't have a favorite. I love them all, and I think that
That's
everybody
cheating.
I know,
That's cheating.
but
You're not allowed to do that.
you actually put this into an interesting perspective because you talked about the VIP experiences, and having done the VIP tour at Top of the Rock and Empire State Building, I feel like I got so much out of both of those tours that I would prioritize those 2 tours over anything else. I loved having access to stuff that I don't normally have access to. I loved learning about things that I pass every day. And remember, I'm a tour guide. You're a tour guide.
Mhm.
The fact that like we could do these tours and learn things that we didn't know, in my opinion, only speaks to the talent, the skill, the depth of knowledge of these tour guides and the quality of these tours. So if you have the money, I know that they are expensive, but if you have it, I think it is a extremely worthwhile experience.
Yeah, if you're like trying to choose a splurge experience, that should be on that list of things that you're looking at and saying, like, let's just do one thing where we spend a lot of money and we really kind of like live it up.
I
Go for the
still
VIP. I
I
think that should
still
be on the
think about
list.
them. Yeah, I still think about them months after having taken them. I'm like, "Oh, that was a great experience." And I've experienced a lot of New York City. So, huge fan of the VIP experiences, and they are not paying me to say that.
Yeah.
I wish they were. If anyone wants to sponsor
Oh,
this
hi.
podcast.
Oh, so soon.
All right. Well, we are at over an hour, so I think maybe we should conclude.
Sounds good to me.
So I hope that this helped anyone who's listening figure out which observation deck is best for them, which experience is best for them when they come to New York City. And we are wishing you most marvelous travels.
And we will see you soon in NYC.
Oh, and make sure that you click subscribe because it helps us bring you more content like this. And if you have any suggestions for topics that you would like to see discussed, you can always email us at mostmarvelousnyc@gmail.com. Thank you so much and have a most marvelous day.